Okay, rulers, settle down. Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to get pre-orders of all the upcoming Force of Will sets, as well as releases of previous sets after they come out. ccgprime.com with over 100,000 Force of Will singles, as well as out-of-print boxes from the past, and TCG accessories, as well as fowlibrary.com, a wonderful resource for deck lists, article discussions, and more. Check them out at fowlibrary.com, as well as these amazing patrons. Special thanks to guest lecturer member Vite Ramen. Thank you for your support. Class is in session. Not wrong. Hello, Fruglers. Welcome back after a long week of Force of Will to your favorite ever live Force of Will vodcast. It's Office Hours featuring myself, TM073, and as always, I am joined by Paul Reisman.
Hey.
And Mike Rance.
If you rearrange the letters in Ryan Miles and you spell that one wrong as well, you get Ryan Miles.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's good. That's good. So tonight, we are so glad to have you all here. Already seeing plenty of people hanging out in the chat. Super happy to have you all here. As a reminder, if you want access to all those cool emotes that Rustin has spammed to showcase off, you consider clicking the join button down below to start as a student here at Ruler School. It's essentially a Twitch subscription, but it goes to support the channel financially and helps us do all kinds of cool stuff. So regardless of that, we're glad to have you here. Guys, rotation happened.
When? How? Who? What?
About 2.5,
Yes.
about 3 weeks ago, rotation happened.
Oh, yeah.
And did you know that there are a lot of rulers in Saga Cluster?
I've heard that. I've heard
Yeah.
that there were a bunch of rulers and you could mix and match them
Yeah,
together.
and there were sets that you could like
them.
mix and match together, and there were ones that you couldn't. And all of them had some degree of competitive success or not. Some degrees being they could have zero. Zero is technically a sum in this sense.
Zero is technically
an
a
amount
In the set. Zero is in the cluster.
So yeah, there you go. So I mean, and she serves the point of what we're talking about. That being said, we are here to talk about a tier list of where we think these rulers exist in terms of the New Frontiers play space. And I think it's important, as we always do with Office Hours, to recognize that we're not just talking competitively. This isn't the Teacher's Lounge. We're talking about any kind of level of, like, is it top tier? Is it
tier.
There is a locals tier, right? Is it super
It's not
competitively
bad, it's
viable?
things
Is
that
it
you'll see somebody playing at your locals?
Yeah, exactly. Or like okay, good enough for locals kind of deck. So we've got the list here. We're going to be going down the list and kind of giving our thoughts. We'd love to hear some thoughts from you in the chat. And what we're going to do also is we want to see your, we're going to post our list on Force of Will Global later tonight, after the podcast tonight. And what
Jeremy,
I'm going to
do... There's no Brad tier on this.
Yeah, I understand. And so
Yeah,
actually,
it's the green tier.
here in the chat right now, you can actually get to this exact same tier list maker, and you can share us your thoughts on the Force of Will Global page in response when we post ours. So I'd be interested to see what you guys have to say about that.
I'm so ready for Toby to go in there.
Mikage, yeah, record.
Mikage
top everything.
Yep.
Yep. For sure. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to go all the way back to the beginning of the cluster. We're going to start with Epic of the Dragon Lord, and we're going to go through those first. So first up we have, that I can see, is we have Oborozuki. So she was our +1/+1 counter deck. She was our instant speed final battle deck. She was one of our first dual color-ish kind of style decks for Saga Cluster. Had some really interesting concepts. Did certainly see some support in the form of Grim and Pandora, which actually gave her a lot of, like, oh, hey, you can kind of do some stuff here. Ultimately, I think we can all agree in terms of competitive viability. At best, she would be semi-viable, but most likely, I think she's going to fall into the locals level.
100%. I think Oborozuki's biggest claim to fame was giving us some of the most busted possible support and still being not very viable. Imagine any other ruler in any other color getting flute for their, strategy.
Yeah.
Like,
True.
So I think if Flute is not enough to save this ruler, it's going in locals tier.
I think the only thing that I think would make me feel comfortable, especially in the meta that we're going into, in the semi-viable category, would be if the white sword hit J rulers. If that card hit,
Yes.
if that card could hit J rulers, then suddenly Oborozuki has a good opening line to naturally feed into her playstyle that also really helps her to be able to combat what we're expecting from the orders, which is you need a threat to try to punish or threaten the early orders. The fact that it only hits resonators is a big drawback, and it is actually one of White's biggest drawbacks in this meta as a whole, is there's not actually a lot of really good, outside of Odin Enters the Game of Gods, specifically for Odin, White doesn't have a lot of really good spot removal for J rulers in the early game. Which is one of the things that you really need to do to be able to consider yourself viable in this format. She is fun. She's absolutely fun. We have people at our locals who still play her. We have people at our locals who
In
still...
Wonder, you just play a red-white version of the deck, and you just drop Sylvia's, put a counter on, and start hitting face.
Yeah,
it's
that
fun.
is important to note here, is that, like, as who said it here? Echo. A lot of the rulers in Saga Cluster are Wanderer. Like, there's some really fun stuff that you can do with them outside of their, like, Saga Cluster
Or they're Banded
support.
Wanderer.
Or they're Banded Wanderer. Gives you some indication there. So, Oborozuki, unfortunately, never really saw the light of day in terms of competitive viability. I think primarily due to the limitations of her J-Ruler hate. And, like, just being able to keep up with some of the more aggressive. Like, she was deemed to be an aggressive, but unfortunately, she just didn't have the threats against the other aggressive decks.
It
so
turns out a 2-mana 12/12 flyer that final battles the board is not good enough when it's attached to a white J-Ruler.
Unfortunately. Unfortunately.
Sad.
I mean, she didn't really have a ton of great spot removal just in general. And so it was like, sure, I guess. I mean, Claw was certainly something we saw from, like, Red Oborozuki that had, like, in her release some competitive-ish success. But in terms of, like, seeing to top tables and staying there, not going to make it. So, moving on, we have Red deck, which is Lilius. Lilius saw some pretty good competitive viability in the opening, especially with how fast it could get. Unfortunately, got a little bit outclassed with Milest Moonstart combination in terms of being the burn deck, because we actually had a dedicated burn deck that didn't need creatures to get aggressive. Now, post-rotation, we have Violet, and in the new stuff, we've got good old Nyarlathotep. So I think, unfortunately, just because of a different turn things sideways deck that turned things sideways better, strength counters have not held up as a competitively viable mechanic, and so I think she also just falls in the locals tier. Thoughts?
Yep, I can agree with that. I think there's somewhat of an argument to put her in semi-viable because
Sure.
she did see competitive success in EDL format with
Sure.
all the stuff after rotation with Alice Cluster, but she dropped off probably harder than any ruler out of EDL, so I think that she deserves the...
Yeah, I think more so than any other ruler in the EDL, what she was trying to do just got replaced and more efficient very quickly. Not to mention that, like, all the things that came along to be able to answer what she was trying to do, which I also think we got fairly quickly in the cluster. Next up we'll go to Mikage. And I actually, it's not going to be tier 0. I actually think you can put this in the semi-viable category.
Jeremy?
And here's why. I don't necessarily think it's because of Mikage himself. I think that the tools that he has access to and the ability to keep up his card advantage, combined with the really good J-Ruler hate that we have in black for very cheap, makes him something that you can at least experiment with. Please note that I'm putting him in semi-viable, which is like you're going to need to put in some work to try to find something, but maybe it's worth looking at. Not just straight into the dumpster. Dracula is a pretty good card. Assault into the Demonic World is a pretty good card. Fallen Angel of Black Tears is a really good card. If you're playing in Mikage, suddenly you get access to this Ominous Sword, which just remove 2 counters and non-chaseable kill spell on a J-Ruler. Like, there's stuff there that I think it would fall for semi-viable. Paul, you agree, disagree?
Yeah, I think Mikage gets a lot better because Dracula is here. I think he also gets better because we do not have dual stones. Ironically, some rulers actually improve because they don't have access to more colors. They get more streamlined. I think 6 Stone does him a lot of benefits. And I mean, he's got some stuff in like Institute to be able to sack a stone and then be able to get a 6 recover flip and have Revenge activated. So there's some things you can do. It makes, the more we talk about it, the more it makes me want to build one for locals. So.
Well, I mean, you know, Ryan's saying, well, now we know how far the set is for semi-viable. And like I said, it's not because of Mikage. It's so, you know, to clarify, it's not because of Mikage himself. It's because he's base black. And like Darkness has like a lot of really, really good tools to help deal with the Order rulers right now. So,
Jeremy,
yeah,
I'm going to need to finish this entire last video pretending like Mikage is even remotely close to the semi-viable tier.
Sure, that's fair. You can do that. You can disagree with me, but right now the vote is 2-1, so he goes on the semi-viable list.
The low end of the
semi-viable tier. Like he's peaking above
D tier.
He's poking above the locals tier, and he's just like, I am here.
Not quite dead, not quite alive.
Not quite alive.
Toby once played at locals and tops, so that makes him much better than locals.
Clearly, that's the bar.
Clearly.
Okay, so let's talk about
the bar.
Let's talk about Celeste for a second. So crazily enough, I think that orders, while rotation and the things that are rotating, the threats presented by the things that are rotating, make Celeste have a chance potentially, or at least as like, maybe let's look at it and see what's going on. I actually think that the things that punish order decks that everyone's going to be playing make Celeste not a choice. Because I think the number of Gradius in every deck that is about to go way high up in play count immediately makes Celeste feel terrible. Being able to remove Eternal and make her a 1/1 and then immediately kill her means that Celeste doesn't have an endgame win con outside of the dragon. And the dragon can't hit J-Rulers. So,
Yeah.
Ryan?
Order makes...
Yeah. Oh, sorry, after hanging out with Jeremy. Wow, he didn't invite me to Ruler School tonight. I'm almost hurt. Me watching the Ruler School tonight. I know exactly why I'm not here. Wasn't I just explaining to you the meta, Ryan? Not like 20 minutes ago. But yeah, I think that as much as the cool stuff that Celeste is doing, there are more things that she is naturally equipped to be able to say, like, hey, I can do stuff against. The threats against her are going to become a lot more common because of what else they answer. And I just think you're going to have a worse time playing her at any kind of competitive viability. Mike, Paul, any other thoughts?
I mean, I agree to an extent. I think that Celeste's more flexible game plans got hurt when we had a lot of cards rotate out. Like, I'm still under the impression that like a go wide kind of Celeste deck, since you had access to a free 900 flying, was kind of okay. And then here we go, losing all the good cards that made that possible, and now she's just a one-trick pony that gets ousted by Gradius and everything.
Yeah, Gradius is a very, very, very good card for this coming format.
I still say if you don't put her in semi-viable and Mikage stays there, I'm going to kick your ass.
Okay, I'll keep her in semi-viable. I'll keep her in semi-viable for the sake of the tools that she has. Still have some oomph there, but she stays in semi-viable versus viable because Gradius keeps her down.
Yes.
Fair compromise. Good. Okay, we've done it.
I can take the compromise. On this. I just know that
I would say the same thing about Mikage, but
yeah, that's fair.
I mean, he won't die to Gradius, but you can easily
remove his eternal.
Remove everything from Gradius.
Yeah. But again, Mikage is not in semi-viable because of, Mikage is not in semi-viable because of Mikage. He's in there because he's a darkness ruler that generates hand advantage. Next up, we have Let's go to Ragnarok.
Not Welser?
So,
we're going to come back to Welser.
The Ragnarok tier list is very, very divisive. If you're American, you put him into locals. If you're European, he's the meta. There's no in between, and I feel like we have to reflect that.
Have you been talking to Europeans about like Saga, like post-rotation Ragnarok?
I don't need to. I just hear about it. I just see it happen.
I haven't seen anyone talking about it.
You're talking to the wrong Europeans, dude.
I guess that's fair. That's very fair. I mean, to be truthful, if I don't hear Lars or Minha telling me that Ragnarok's good, I don't believe it. So, like,
that's correct.
Neither of them has told me that Ragnarok is good.
For the most part,
I would think, like, my concern with Ragnarok is the lack of... I mean, like, he does have some nice things, right, built into him that can help, right? We have Kill All J Ruler, so that's a free way to be able to pop an ordered card if we need to. You got the will production. You still have the potential for these other things. You have 8 5-color stone. You also have 8 5-color stones. In the sense that, like, you have 4 Ragstone and you have 4 6/8 stones, which is like always on live. My concern is that some of the biggest combos, some of the heaviest hitting cards that Ragnarok was playing have rotated. So they would have
does get hurt a lot by rotation.
They would have to be a lot of, like, don't get me wrong, I think I could argue with putting him in semi-viable because the same reasons that made him get better and stay viable as more cards came out is still a thing now. Like, as the card pool increases, Ragnarok has more tools. So I think something to watch and kind of maybe come back to. But right now I think probably sits in this semi-viable category. Like, his earliest, like, pressure dominating card lines, he can't play anymore, right?
Yeah, like, I agree with him being in semi-viable because it's also a very good idea of waiting.
Yeah.
Because, you know, American players building decks matters way more than Europeans do. So we get extra little oomph down towards locals instead of up towards that. If it was Americans on top and the Europeans on the bottom, I would have said he's viable. But, you know, you got to make got to make the bridge somewhere. You know, sorry everyone that isn't Minha and Lars.
Robert talking about can use the for back to Celeste. This is an interesting point. Can use the treasure that gives her viable and can use the wall to give her instant speed barrier. And she does have the ability to have a huge handful of cards, so there actually could be something there to, like, wall Celeste, like a new take on it. That's worth exploring, my friend, for sure. Good point. Thanks, Robert. Okay. Anything else to say about Ragnarok?
Hold on.
Go for it.
Yes.
Go for it.
I think on top of all of that, I mean, he lost half his card pool, but the other thing is Feethsing can just stop his stuff.
Yeah, that's a big piece too.
So against any Kage deck, it just doesn't feel good.
I mean, against Kage, you have literally at any time a 1, 2, or 3 mana way to remove every moon they control from the game.
That's true.
That's true.
So if you are pushing, if you're pushing it through your hand, you could respond to the Feethsing to remove all their moons. So Feethsing cancel technically is if you can pay 0, and you could. So that's
I'm pretty sure you can pay 0. Yeah.
Yeah, you could set it so that you could pay 0.
We do have 2 discard spells.
Yep. And
so we have the one that removes tails or villains,
can hit a Feethsing.
Which can hit Feethsing, and then you have the battle comes to an end, which can also hit Feethsing, but then also hit Hanzo.
Also Suya.
And Keep the Faith is a new card to add to the repertoire for Ragnarok to be able to grab back Water Servant, Wind Servant. Okay, there's something there. There's like, again, we put semi-viable because it's like maybe we need to sleep on it and wait on it a little bit, but it's not but like we need to find out what his new big threats are. Like his threats, he's kind of had his fangs clipped a little bit, and so we need to do some digging to see what else he can kind of play into. So let's talk about Welser. I'm actually going to put Welser in the viable tier here, because of the ISIS toolbox. The speed in which a deck can get to 10 stones is remarkable right now. And like in the same way that Nyarlathotep, like you've watched, for those of you who are members and watched the game where I get absolutely, the members only video game of where I got absolutely clapped by Nyarlathotep, he produces like 19 fire will, like in excess, just from like going through the like stuff from ISIS, not even an ordered ISIS, just a regular ISIS. So then you think of like trying to do into that combo, get to 10 stones, and then being able to play like Mysteries of Moojstart or Mysteries of My List very quickly, right at 10 stones. Suddenly Welser has that kind of stuff to be able to play into, where it's like, I only need one Mysteries of My List because I've got all this floating will, and I just need to keep casting it until you're dead. There's something there to say you don't need to be the meme matchstick deck anymore to be a red Welser. And
you can still be the meme matchstick.
Yes, you can. You absolutely can be meme matchstick.
You will blow somebody out in Swiss. You'll just lose every other game.
Yes. I think that Welser sits in the viability category as a new age red Welser. Especially with like magic, because you also think of like Magic Stone Dance of Chaos. Like just imagine this, right? Magic Stone Dance of Chaos just by itself, because it'll recover when you cast it. If you have 2 in hand, suddenly you're sitting at 7 stones on 1. That's a lot. And then you think of like Manifestation of Power, which gets you a stone, which can like double off of Welser, right? So like Manifestation gets you a new stone and recovers a stone. So then like the next Manifestation, you can kind of keep cantripping over and over again. So just dab on it.
What cards do I need in this deck again?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Just take an ISIS combo deck and put it in Welser. So
where's my ISIS?
Yeah. There. So there you go. I think that's where Welser sits in terms of like, do I think that he's meta? No. Do I think that if you wanted to play him, would I play it if I went to a GP? No. Do I think that it could take top 16 at a GP? Yes. Like, definitely. So yeah, Rustin getting the Keurig flexes. Why be a green ruler when you can just be a green ruler that plays red cards? Which we've seen the reverse of that.
Why be an American player playing controlled mid-range decks when you could be an American player playing aggro fast deck, go fast, hit face?
Yeah. I would say he has more viability in this concept than Matchstick has viability concept-wise, because it's not just
Magic's garbage.
Because it's not a meme. It's like an actual deck that has like some flexibility to it. Okay, so that is EDL out the way. We have 3 semi-viables, 2 locals, and a viable. I think for the first set of a new cluster post-rotation, I'm okay with that spread. Like, that's about what I would expect from, first set of a new cluster kind of going into it. Now we go into set 2.
Mikage respect.
That's fair. Now we go into Magic Stone War. Now, I think that gets us into... So hear me out. I'd like to look at Magic Stone War because it's hard to say like, let's look at the tag pairings, because that's not what we have on screen here. It's what we have like
we could have had the tag pairings.
We could have had, but there's a lot.
A really, really long video.
I don't want to do that. So I'd like to, for the most part, for each of them, I'd like to talk about what kind of deck they were before. What type of deck they were before in terms of how they were primaried, and whether or not that's good now. So like Zero, even beforehand, Zero was locals level. She continues to sit at the locals level. She was unfortunately very poorly designed and awful, so she will sit in the locals level.
Her name indicates the amount of play she saw.
Exactly.
Anyway.
Zero.
So Jeremy, real talk.
Sure.
if we're gonna look at these 6 Sages rulers individually,
Sure.
there was only one that saw competitive play in a GP as a singleton ruler. And that was my last.
Yeah.
But he goes into the
meta.
If we're talking about
well, he is actually the one that I want to talk about next. Is my list. My list saw kind of 2 different variations where he was the star. One of which was the burn variant with Moodstart as his supporter because of all the cheap burn that came into play, and the other was supported by Zero or Almerius to be judgmenting faster, the really go face aggro version, right?
There was also the Feethsing my list burn combo.
Burn combos, sure. So those are the 3 kind of ideas as my list is the core decks, right? I think in the same vein, I think that those decks stay in a semi-viable to locals level category because those deck ideas are still present and could still definitely sneak wins even at a GP if you're not prepared for it. Do I think that those decks could even get you close to a top 16? Probably not. It could get you to a tie record or just below a tie record, but I don't think they're going to get you there the rest of the way. But I do think that their capacity to steal games makes this a ruler that can't just sit at locals. My list core featured decks. Would you guys agree?
Yep, I can agree with that.
Yeah.
I think that he is out of all the decks that he's best in, he's the less viable of those rulers.
Yes. Hello, your World Explorer. Glad to have you here.
My World Explorer?
Oh.
You mean our World Explorer?
Our World Explorer. I'm sorry.
Oh.
So
they're
let's
exploring.
Let's talk about Moodstart a little bit. So Moodstart is strange among the Fallen Angel rulers in regards to that.
Moody is very weird amongst the Fallen Angel rulers, being a 6 Sage, but
shut up. Anyway, Moodstart is very interesting among the 6 Sage rulers in the fact that she never really had a front runner status at a deck, right? She was always the support. She was always the dig. She was always the extra hand size. She was the flexibility throughout the game when she was partnered with Almerius, when she was partnered with Cruz Ballesta, when she was partnered with Feethsing. It was never really my Moodstart deck. It was nah, I'm playing an Almerius deck. Nah, I'm playing a Cruz Ballesta deck. Nah, I'm playing an Feethsing deck. Moodstart is just there to help it along. So as much as you would think I would put Moodstart in the meta category, I don't think Moodstart is the meta. I think she's viable because of the strength that she lends to the meta decks.
She's the best support tag ruler.
Yes, for sure.
Right.
Hands down. And so I think that the question becomes, the question that I have going into New Frontiers now, with the great utilitarian cards that we have lost, how does that impact the builds? And does that take away, not necessarily some of the strength, because I do think the ability to kind of make, I still think your decision trees are infinitely bigger because you have Moodstart, right? But the options, the good options in terms of what she can filter you into has diminished. So then it becomes, well, if the options are diminished, is there something else that I could be using for my support? And that's the question to answer. I don't have the answer to that right now. I just think that's the question that puts Feethsing or Moodstart in a weird spot right now. Is because her toolbox is significantly shrunk. She's still an amazing toolbox flexibility ruler, but what she can find you has diminished, just because of rotation. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Paul. What's your thoughts?
I jive with 90% of that. I still think that even she is a win con on her own if you need her to be.
Sure.
I've seen I definitely seen Brandon Brema just swing for a game because of Mujdart getting so big and having flying. She's definitely not as impressive as something like Feethsing.
Right.
It happened. I watched it. I was there.
Yeah.
I had.
Oh, he's gone.
But
he's back.
I mean, nothing is as impressive as Feethsing is, right? So.
Yep.
When it comes down to Mujdart, though, like the fact that she.
Yeah, that's fair.
Oh my gosh. Am I like buffering like really bad?
You're back now. You're back now.
I'm back now. Here, let's do this. Goodbye.
Okay, bye. We'll see you in a second.
Goodbye. I think what she does is she extends what Feethsing is able to do. She's able to get rid of dead cards in your hand. So I definitely agree with the fact that she's like the best support ruler in the Six Ages.
Sure.
But because of what she enables, I think she's definitely metagame.
Sure. Okay.
With Feethsing. But with anything else, that's not really the case.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. So
yeah, I like that thought behind it. I think that talking about how she's like really, really solid, but like next level when paired with.
Right. So because of the way we're discussing this, I think viable is natural, but Feeth's Muj together she'd pull Mujdart up to the viability or to the meta category.
Before we start talking about Feethsing, let me grab more wine. So
I'm not talking about Feethsing quite yet. I'm gonna go to I'm gonna go to Gruce Ballesta, who I actually think bumps up to being meta, and here's why. The craziness is there's a couple of things. Magic Stone Dance of Chaos is insane in Gruce Ballesta. The ability for him to be able to ramp 3 permanent stones on one is pretty crazy when you consider then you get golems for 1, you get Awakening of Gruce Ballesta on 1. We technically have a new Arla combo in this deck, in the form of this deck. Like, I think that it is something that you need to be prepared for, and that could get you to a top 8 finish in this meta.
Just watching Mike's face.
Mike, feel free to hear counter arguments.
No.
Okay. It's not a counter argument. That's a counter statement.
But it's a visceral response anyway.
Sure.
So my only argument that Gruce Ballesta should be anything higher than semi-viable is the fact that we don't have consistent stones anymore. We don't have the dual stones that we used to have, which means that his ability to start you off with a proper stone is much better than what it previously was. That being said, I don't see this Gruce Ballesta control into combo into big finish deck coming to fruition, even with the tools that we have. Like, obviously, Nyarlathotep's tools with him to sack the stone that you get off of that, get a new one that isn't affected by that. It's cute. It's good. But it's not meta-defining. I will argue this to the end of time. I don't think that. Can we
compromise on viable? Can we compromise on viable?
100%.
I'll accept the compromise on viable. Having played the deck and had the deck played against me, I think there is more bite to it than you're giving it credit for. But we can compromise there.
I think that it's a pipe dream as much as Nyarlathotep T1 combos are also a pipe dream.
Oh, I think the Nyarlathotep T1 combos are very much a pipe dream, and people need to stop trying to play it. See our podcast of last week. Stop.
But I picture this Gruce Ballesta control combo deck in the exact same vein. That's just my opinion.
That's totally fair. Totally fair position. Paul, any thoughts?
I was just going to say, I built the deck for Jeremy, and I asked him afterward, like, how did it go? And he felt that the Gruce Ballesta Almerius list was very reliant on Magic Stone Dance of Chaos.
Yeah, I'll give that credit.
That alone kind of limits it for me in viable.
With Oz, the Great Wizard, to search out the Magic Stone Dance of Chaos, and then you got the combo going. Let's go, baby.
Let's go. Let's make it hyper consistent and Wanderer.
are 3-drops search a card, which means they're unviable. Anyway.
Before we get to our last two 6 stages,
so they get peaks unviable.
Before we get to our last two 6 stages, let's talk about Wolfgang 1. He goes in the locals level. That was a good talk. Let's talk about Almerius.
Whoa.
There are more ways to punish the Wolfgang combo than there were before, and there are more ways to punish the Wolfgang combo in ways that feel worse. Like, feels worse for the Wolfgang player. The deck has gotten even worse.
But and it was already somebody in Swiss.
Then you're
gonna lose.
That's why we have a locals tier, buddy. That's why we have a locals tier.
Hey, I said Swiss. I didn't say locals.
Let's talk about
your Rozuki deck is gonna trash locals, but your Wolfgang deck is gonna trash your round 1 opponent who brought Priscia, not knowing what he was getting into, and then you're gonna be like, and then he's gonna be like, oh no, I lost. You're like, haha, I got a 1-0, and then you go 1-6. And you're great.
That's good. Let's talk about Almerius.
Okay, I can deal with Almerius without a glass of wine.
Sure. Let's talk about Almerius. She lost her biggest strength in the form of Final Stance and the form of Rhea. That was the sickest deck, not gonna lie. She lost her biggest, like, as weird as this is going to say, I think that she has shifted from even having a viable deck where she is the primary to being she is a support ruler. She cannot be the front runner. I think the tap effect is and the board pump effect are the things that she brings to the table. The reanimates in white. If you want to play a white reanimator deck, you just play Odin instead. It's just it's just because it's uncancelable and it's honestly just better. So
3,000 life ain't what it used to be, man.
Well, I mean, like, because the thing is, the reason why you had that 3,000 life was so huge is because of the fact of, like, what she did with that extra time made it so that you really, as long as you kept like 2,500 of it or whatever, you just needed, like, almost, it didn't really matter that she was 7,000. It was really, she just needed to be 5,000 just to give her some breathing room so that she could double turn you, right? That was her big kind of thing. Now decks are pretty good at grinding. Like, if they need to, at least if they're built properly, they're pretty good at grinding. So the 3,000 life isn't really that much anyway, because if you weren't already winning and your opponent got you to 0 from 4,000, you probably aren't going to win in that last 3,000, right? It's not really doing you much. And so I think she sits for the same reason that Moodstart sits in the viable tier. I think Almerius sits in the viable to maybe semi-viable. I'm more
viable, honestly.
Yeah. So
hear me out.
Go for it.
Moodstart has more long-term validity than Almerius does.
I would agree.
Correct.
Which is one of the reasons why I think, like, because there's also a white deck that does the gimmick that Almerius does, but better, is why I would shift her down to semi-viable. Like, board pumps aren't something that I'm like, yeah, I need that.
Let's go. Board pumping time.
So I don't know. Paul, I think Mike has said viable. I've said either or. Where would you put her on viable or semi-viable?
Paul's gonna come in.
I'm gonna say semi-viable.
That's what I thought you were gonna say. I knew it.
Yeah. I mean, unless Jeremy does some, like, crazy Eldorado crap again with Almerius, I just don't think she's.
I just
viable.
do it with Odin because it's
do it with Odin.
It's uncancelable and I can do it every turn. Eldorodin, dude. Eldorodin. Okay.
It's like it was made to be a pun.
And then Feethsing. Yeah, go get your drink. I'm gonna go ahead and shift Feethsing up to the meta spot.
This without me. Talk amongst yourselves.
Oh, we're not gonna talk about why she's meta yet. We're just gonna put her on there while he gets some more wine. That being said, Paul,
I'm making the Welser deck. Hold on, what?
You're gonna make this Welser deck really quick?
I'm making the Welser deck, right?
Sure. So let's talk about Brad and why he's locals tier. That was a good conversation. If anything, Brad has gotten saddened by the fact that his best cards have been co-opted by the order rulers. Like we're saving
They're
Mike some
better
time.
in Kaguya.
Yeah,
than
they're
they are.
better in Kaguya than they are in Brad. So
Oh,
yeah,
Brad.
yeah. Oh, Brad.
Oh, Brad.
We just had We'll tell Mike that we I got
Did you already
comments that
put
may
Feethsing
flip.
in the meta?
We put her in the meta category. We're going to talk about why in just a second. We were just saying how that Brad, if we had a lower tier, which I would say erase from existence tier, that would be where Brad goes, because his support cards are better in other rulers now than even they were in Brad. So
Can't spell bread without bad.
Brad is untiered.
untiered. We'll just leave him
It's
off.
the only impenetrable. That's the funniest part.
I'm gonna
He's
leave him.
untiered.
I'm gonna leave him off the tier list. Brad doesn't even get to be on the tier list. Brad is just the prototype to order. Brad is just the prototype to order. Okay, so let's go back to Feethsing for a second, because the reason why I would put her in the meta is
no way.
I use her on this channel. The reason why I would put her in the meta is just because she is the strongest of the 6 Sage rulers. Like, she is, whatever you're trying to do with a 6 Sage deck, Feethsing is just going to make it better. And she gives you access to the best toolbox package in green, which has a lot of really good tools to it and continue to be good tools. Again, I think that some of her threats need to be reevaluated a little bit with the rotation. Not necessarily completely reevaluated, but I do think the deck has to look a little different. I think you're still playing Feethsing loop, or you're still playing Prescia loop and that kind of stuff, but I think the question that has to be answered for Feethsing is what are her best answers now? Because some of the best answer cards she had have rotated. Sorry, I just got your chat here.
I know. Welcome.
So like the thing that Feethsing has is that in this meta, the answer that Feethsing has to find, I think, for this meta is what are her. How does she replace?
Right.
How does she replace the good answers that she had, and how does she find a way to deal with J rulers? We talked about this last meta, and it's one of the reasons why we saw Violet flips against Feethsing having competitive success. Is the fact that like J rulers are a problem for Feethsing to deal with. She just doesn't have a lot of that. That she can access quickly. So it becomes, in a format with 4 rulers filled with uncancelable J rulers, the things that Feethsing is wants to be able to cancel things and can't answer J rulers effectively. Like, there are threats that Feethsing has to figure out. That Feethsing doesn't just get to say, hey, I already have the answers there. But the natural strength of Feethsing still keeps her in the meta category, I would agree with. I would put that
Let's
there.
also talk more about Feethsing and the fact that, let's talk about every possible good thing that a ruler and a J ruler could do. Let's just take here's a little microcosm.
I'm hearing you.
What's every good thing that a ruler can do? The first things first. It prevents it judgments in a time that's inconvenient for your opponent. Feethsing could do that literally anytime. Next up on the list.
Okay. Costs 3, but go on.
If you're not playing Almerius, costs 2. Let's go, buddy. Green white control.
Okay. Continue.
Also in this microcosm, I've heard cancel spells are really good in Force of Will. What if we just slap that onto the body?
Like, cancel's just lost strength. Like, cancel's literally just lost strength.
Anyway, it's fine. Your opponent's already going to have an ordered thing. They're going to try and do something. You're facing the thing they just did. It doesn't matter. I don't give a shit about the ordered thing. The ordered thing's going to die to whatever I do because I'm playing the best Force of Will.
Riko Komashi, you're talking about how you're having success with Brad, we would love to see that. If you've got the footage and you want to record it, absolutely. That's the beauty of this. People see things that we don't, and that's why people have differing opinions of tier lists. So by all means, we love being proven wrong. Go for it. Continue, Mike.
Make Kutobi tier list. Continuing on. What's really hard to interact with? Flying, especially when the card doesn't have wings. Oh, look at that. Feethsing doesn't have wings. Got flying. 5/7 body.
There's a lot more flyers nowadays. Continue.
Anyway, it's fine.
There's literally a one-drop spell that gives flying. Continue.
But we have a one-drop spell that destroys flyers. Anyway, continuing on. Is it one drop? This might be 2 drop. I don't remember. I haven't played Forcible in like a month. Anyway, so Feethsing also does that. So she does this.
Okay.
She does that.
Okay.
Also, remember how producing mana is really good because so Feethsing can do that.
Yeah, but she lost some of the best things that she lost one of the best tools that she was producing mana for.
It's fine. Melfi exists. It's fine. And then also on top of that, you ever heard about consistency? Well, guess what? Your stupid deck over there, you stupid Wolfgang idiot, you're going to draw 5 cards. None of them are going to be Nyarlathotep. You're going to put them back. I'm sorry, it's Shub. But you're going to put all of them back. And you draw 5 more cards. And also none of them are Shub. And you're going to cry about it. But you know what is great? You know what's great? Feethsing can find all of that 4 times.
There's a reason why she's still in the meta category, Mike. There's a reason.
She's banned in Wanderer. Wanderer's broken, and she's more broken than Wanderer. Continue.
She has to answer my questions first. She has to answer those questions for me. Like she's still strong enough to sit comfortably in the meta category for sure. When we move, if she wants to keep herself there post first tournament, post like actually seeing competitive what people are bringing to the competitive table, she has to be able to answer those 2 questions in my mind of what are her new replacements for her answers, and what are for like the answers that she's lost, because I do think she's lost some, and how does she deal with Jade rulers. Like she has to be able to answer those 2.
If I wasn't such a Carlina simp, I would build the dumbest Feethsing deck right now, but I can't drop my girl like that. So
I've already built the best Carlina list for this meta. You can just build mine and move on.
Jeremy, I'm gonna fight you.
Please.
Well. Oh my gosh.
Why is ban the witch hidden? I'm sorry, Echo. Jesus, that's
ban the witch.
That's not even censored.
Okay. So anyway,
so
any other thoughts?
So I'm thinking about Feethsing, and I'm like, she has 20 cards, right? She has Prisia, she has Lycion, she has Melfi, set a suite of cancels, and then Welser, right? So I'm like, what other 20 cards can I put in this deck in order to make it a thing?
If it's not Cassia's Sword, I don't know what it is, dude. It's free advantage.
Cassia's Sword,
Excalibur.
Does Dogra Magra create 20 different choice loops?
No.
Or is it just random? Dolly Dogra Magra Burn?
It's 20 different choice loops, by the way. Dogra.
That's what I thought. I wasn't sure.
No, not what is it? It's you could use Dolly on Dogra Magra to like choose 20.
No, you cannot. I'm pretty sure Charlie was talking about how you can't fucking Dolly a Maga Doo-Doo.
Dogra Magra? Maybe not. I don't know. They'll tell us we're wrong, which is okay.
Charlie, you tell us. Send us an email at rulerschooltcg@gmail.com.
Rustin,
send us an email at frauds@frauds.com.
Rustin, we just put the Carlina deck list match up. Order Killer. That was
Order Killer's there. That's what we're talking about.
Sure. The Carlina mirror. Sure. We'll go with that.
There's something there. That's all I'm gonna say. There's something there. She's definitely meta.
Let's talk about Assault.
I don't think she's gonna ever answer your questions though.
That's probably true. Assault into the Demonic World. One last thing about Feethsing is I need to. If I was going to pick a green control ruler, as it stands right now, because of the thing that because of those questions that are left unanswered for me to Feethsing, she also needs to prove to me that she can beat Kaguya, and I'm not sure if she can.
I love how most of the rules in this video take like 5 minutes, maybe 6 minutes, and then Feethsing's
as we get to competitive, as we get to competitive viability, there's more to discuss, right? It's easier to write off ones that are just harder to place. So anyway, let's go into other things. So we've got Brad is untiered. Oh, we've already come back to that. Faria, I would say because of I would put her in the semi-viable category because and not the. I would put her there purely from the sake of, like, if we're talking about my list being able to burst out some aggression, then you have to talk about the fact that Faria could potentially get there. I think that if I was going to choose a competitively viable deck doing that kind of thing, I would just pick Nyarlathotep. But yeah, I mean, it's there. I can be voted out. That's totally fine. If the two of you would agree that we should put her down to local level, let's do it. Paul's definitely seeming like he wants me to put down to local level. I know Mike does. Yeah, 2-1. I've been voted out.
I boxed her. along with Brad. She's gone.
Unfortunate. Let's talk about
I
Paul.
Jeremy's opinion off the island.
Yeah, Paul. Olivia.
Yes.
Mike and I are going to stay completely silent. You are 100% responsible for where Olivia falls on this tier list.
I have no claim to fame over Olivia.
Oh, thanks, Brednon, for pointing that out for us.
I'm gonna say semi-viable.
Mike and I are completely out. Mike and I are completely out of this. You give us your reasoning why.
Semi-viable.
Cute dolphin.
Because. So when I think about order rulers, I think about Kaguya and being able to blow up all of her additions with Pulsing Thunder. I think of maybe having a potential harder time against Odin if they haggle me into, not having chance. That feels bad. She's never been like super meta, so I wouldn't say viable. But I would definitely say semi-viable. A fun ruler, could do things, has tools, doesn't quite have all the tools she needs to go like consistent.
Give me some more good 2-drop blue cards.
Yeah.
I will say,
because of order rulers, Girion doesn't feel like this is going to be in every single deck. It still feels strong. It still feels like a threat, but it doesn't feel like it's going to be nearly as ubiquitous as it was before. So maybe that helps Olivia in some way, helps her like rise a little bit. I would put her like between semi-viable and viable, somewhere in there.
That's fair. Next up, we have Violet. I think she goes up on the meta tier list.
Hey,
with
blue's a great color now.
I think. Okay. I think that Violet.
Echo.
I think that Violet goes up in the meta category.
Not Charlie messaging me on the side saying you can't dolly dog macro.
Thank you. Yeah, we got it. Brednon corrected us in the chat too. Perfect. Yeah, Olivia has bubbled a couple of times for sure. And she didn't really lose much, if anything. Like color fixing wise, she's just fine. Because what if her color base is doing? So like there's some credit to what Paul is saying there. Violet sits up in the meta because Violet has literally lost nothing. And what Violet is wanting to do is still good against order decks. She still has good J-Ruler hate. She still has the ability to silence. She still has, this. She can play this grind game. She has Bahamut. She still has this really good grind game if she needs to, in the form of things like Firestorm and stuff like that. So like everything that Violet was doing is still good. I think you could even stand to like slow down Violet just a smidge and maybe even shore up your chances a little bit more. But I think that Violet is still a very, very good deck. And worth recognizing that it's there.
I was on the fence between viable and the meta, but I do believe that
Dark Providence, Gradius, and Aegis are all very huge. Magical Loveliness also very good because it can tap down J-Rulers. Not that it doesn't stop them with stones.
She does her thing better than almost anyone else can do. So
yeah,
I would agree with that. I think she's a lower placement in the meta than Feethsing.
Sure.
I would put Feethsing at like top dog right now, but Violet's still Violet.
Sure. That's very fair. I'm gonna shift some stuff around here. Yeah, she lost the red blue stone, which hurts her ability to play reliably. Maribella from RFG, that's not a huge blow to her. Yeah, Violet doesn't really care what her.
Health margin does not matter. You just don't play healing robot. Oops, I have to just play my aggro deck like an aggro deck now.
Whoopsies.
Here I go.
Or you play the 3-drop Violet and feel really good about it. That card
don't
is.
Play the 3-drop Violet, you crazy
Well, and
man.
I'm not going to spoil it for later, but like, just the decrease in turbo stand makes her a little bit more viable too.
That's true.
Because now all of her stuff isn't just removed.
Yeah, that's fair. So let's talk about our last one in this one, which would be Wolfgang. To me, I would put him in between semi-viable and viable. I think it's hard for me to tip him one way or the other.
I wish the card that shut his entire deck down wasn't printed in the same set that he was printed in. Oops. The Witch of the Fallen Kingdom.
Oh, the Searcher Witch. Yeah. I think that, like, so here's the thing. Here's my thought process. Here's my thought process for why I think I would, as of now, put him in the semi-viable range in this current meta, is because his stone base wasn't necessarily the problem because of the fact that his ability is X cost and like he's relying a lot on his demonic worlds and has filtering for that and stuff like that. And I do think that he gets kind of a boon because I just don't think we're going to see Dark Witch played nearly as much because searching isn't necessarily all over the place, right? So we've got some buffer there. The thing that makes me put him towards the semi-viable, like he needs work, is Dark Sun. A Dark Sun sticks and Wolfgang goes, that's a good game of Force of Will we were playing.
Understandable. Have a nice day.
Understandable. Have a nice day. So I would say that the prevalence of Odin, which I arguably think is probably the weakest of the Order rulers in terms of competitive success, would push me towards viability of Wolfgang 2 versus non-viability, if that makes sense. So like as Odin goes down, Wolfgang 2's viability goes up and like directly inverse to one another.
I'll add to that too. So Feethsing still really hurts Wolfgang 2.
Yes. But also Feethsing
as well.
but he can play Wolfgang, but he can play Feethsing.
He can play Feethsing, which is a thing. But against the Kage matchup, that's also kind of rough. Opening up with the Feethsing is just like, yeah, you don't get a momentum that I do.
No, you ain't.
But that's why, like, you do it during. That's why you can like do it during upkeep, right?
Yeah.
You like do it during upkeep and then move to recover. Like I said, as it stands, my baseline for Wolfgang 2 is semi-viable. He has enough things to make it so that to find the right build for him, you're going to need to put in some work. But what he is doing, if he can do it successfully, is good. So he needs some work to be able to put there. I think that a grindy Wolfgang.
I would say viable.
You would say viable?
I would say viable, but needs work. Has some bad matchups, but it's not like against everything else. He's really good still.
Okay, Mike, you're the tiebreaker. Viable or semi-viable?
Semi-viable.
There you go.
I think there's just a little bit too much against him to make him go into the viable. I think he's also a little bit too passive and reliant on going to a specific game plan for himself to really break out of that semi-viable category. I think his game plan is very much like set in stone until a certain point in the game.
Or unless we experiment with him and find something else for him to do. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. He needs to reinvent himself, but if he can reinvent himself, there's definitely something there. Okay, so let's talk about the.
Well, first of all, put Brad somewhere else here. I see him on the list.
He's not on the list anymore. He's off the list. He's not on the list.
What's he doing next to Stan?
This is the people who haven't been put on the tier list yet.
I don't want him close to the tier list.
He's untiered. He's not gonna get put on the tier list, Mike. Anyway, let's talk about Stan, because I actually think that Stan last meta, I think the Fallen Angels have changed a lot. I think that Stan saw more play than we gave him credit for at first in terms of the Turbo Stan lines. I legitimately do not think that Stan Turbo Stan is a viable strategy anymore. In my eyes, Stan is used as a cancel or a utility option in the middle of a chain. Like, that is what Stan is good for now, as opposed to being like a dominant threat. And so for that reason, I would put Stan in the semi-viable category. The amounts of times that you would like rely on him is very low. If you can find good lines to use with him, you can definitely win games. So it's good to have that in your back pocket, but I don't go into games thinking about using Stan. Fair? So that's why I put Stan in the semi-viable area.
Yep, I agree with that.
Yeah, I agree.
Beatrice goes in the locals level.
All right.
Unfortunate.
Yeah, there's nothing really to say there. While the null, don't get me wrong, it is fun, and the null mechanic does feel better fleshed out and more fun. The existence of Dante is a hard punish to that, which is unfortunate. And the best thing that null can do, Violet can do better. So Beatrice is more of a, you're playing her for flavor and want to enjoy her, play her at locals. Just naturally.
Flavor.
Turbo Stan is also terrible in this meta because Feethsing exists and you'll cry a lot. Yeah, you'll cry a lot.
Yeah, man.
Not wrong.
The Feethsing Resonator exists and you'll cry. Pay 2 sets stand face down and standby. Hey,
That's the real meta plays.
There it is. Let's talk about.
That's illegal.
Let's talk about some other ones. Let's talk about Asmodeus.
Semi-viable, I think.
I would agree that semi-viable is the place. The successful Asmodeus lists from last event still lost 2 of their best tools because at the back of the combos that they were playing for like the silly turn 1 plays, they were fast Virgil decks. And fast Virgil decks lost 2 of their best tools, which is Raise and Revive and Izanami. And so I think that fast Virgil core decks have taken a big hit, that there's really nothing to replace what you've lost. And so you have to accept that the strength of that strategy is gone. And so while, yes, I think that the combo silly stuff that Asmodeus, especially Asmodeus Carlina, has done, like Asmodeus core Carlina support deck has done, I don't think the consistent dominant threats that those decks tried to bring forward to keep themselves afloat when their combos flubbed isn't there. And so I think that Asmodeus goes down to being in the semi-viable category. Stan does not enter the field as long as the Feeth Resonator is there. Yeah. You're not going to resolve the God Art of Feethsing.
Someone just Feethsing.
Yeah, Feethsing's Mike. You're not going to resolve the God Art of Stan if there's a Feethsing in existence. Don't retract that message, coward. So let's go to Dante, because I think actually this brings up an interesting point. Dante, I would put in like low viable to high semi-viable as a primary. Because again, I think fast Virgil decks have gotten worse. And I say that because of the presence of the order decks, and similarly to Celeste, strangely enough, the things that are good or that people are bringing in to be better prepared to deal with the order decks are just naturally things that will help you against Dante, like early Virgils. So I think that Virgil shifts to being more of a, almost kind of like we were playing it in Hungry Box, of like, I've grinded the game out, I have enough will, I'm gonna go get a Virgil, slam it, and then immediately ping you to death. And so to me, Dante's like viability there comes in the fact that when it's time, I get Virgil. Like, I have the Searcher to get my Virgil, but I don't think the strength of Dante is from the fast Virgil flip anymore. And so for that reason, that's why I put him in kind of in that narrow. I still think it's good. I don't think that it's like quite as bumped up into the guaranteed meta slot as I would put it before. Would you guys agree?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. That brings us to 3 more rulers. I don't know which one to talk about first. I think we talked
about Astema, because I think Astema's viable.
Okay, we're about to have an interesting conversation here. I think
we are indeed.
Which is totally good. I would put her in the meta category.
Interesting.
Because
right.
I think in the era of the order decks, what I've been experiencing playing against the order decks, a lot of them have, there's a couple of factors. A lot of them play neutral, if not just ahead of neutral value-wise. And then a lot of them being J-rulers can tumble if you remove their J-ruler properly. So to me, and having been playing Carlina Astema for a bit, Astema makes it so I am constantly generating value, right? Every card I cast, every major card I cast has the capability of generating value, and I'm always threatening J-ruler kill. And that, to me, in my opinion, shifts Astema to being the new anchor of Fallen Angel ruler. It used to be Carlina. Last meta, it was Carlina supporting a Belial deck, Carlina supporting a Dante deck, Carlina supporting an Astema deck, right? Carlina supporting an Asmodeus deck. And I get why, right? 100% I get why. I think that role has reversed. I think that Astema is now the best anchor for the Fallen Angel decks in a format that has orders in it. Because I think Carlina Astema is different than Astema Belial is different than Astema Dante. And I think that all of those decks, I think that Astema brings a lot to all of those decks.
Having played the deck, I can confirm. Like, it's hard for me to argue against that.
I'm going to give a very interesting take on this.
Go for it.
I think that Astema, while being good, is not the meta, and is not a meta-defining ruler, simply because, partially, one part of this, we have Satan in semi-viable. And
okay, that's a good point that
okay.
that's a good point that I will counter back with. So continue.
Yes, good. So that's one part.
Sure.
The second part is that you are very much at your opponent's mercy when you're playing Astema. You can play the control game very well, but your game plan and your win condition are all very hinged on your own answers to yourself. And if you're trying to answer yourself while your opponent is trying to answer you, there are 2 very important pieces here, especially going into a format with Kaguya Feethsing type stuff, with just the ability to Welser back things, with the ability to just stop you from playing your win con is the big deal that I think that's the only reason. If this wasn't the deal here, if this wasn't even like, if Feethsing didn't exist, if a lot of these plays didn't exist, if a lot of these answers didn't exist in the same capacity that they did, I would very much consider Astema to be the meta. But I think there's just maybe like 2 things overarching her as a meta choice, personally.
So here's my counterpoints to that, because I think those are great points.
Okay.
I think those are great points. The piece about Stan that I think mitigates what you're talking about and why it doesn't matter that Stan's on semi-viable is because the text of Stan that matters for Astema is different than the text of Stan that matters for Stan. The text of Stan that matters for Astema is a pay 2 black, instant speed, as many times as you want, replace Stan. The text of Stan that matters for Stan is his God's Art, which is a once total. And so I think that those are two separate factors. The other reason that I will say to what you're saying is that she can play this control grind game and you're looking for your own answers is that you have your own answer, that it doesn't matter what your opponent does. It does what it needs to, which is Virgil, which is I can cast Virgil by killing a stemma, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. In a format where discard has probably gotten significantly worse because of the discard spells that we've lost and probably the conceived viability of discard, Virgil's in hand probably going to stay there, meaning that when I find it, because I'm digging a million cards, when I need to turn off a stemma, I don't care what you're going to do, I'm going to turn off a stemma. Even if it means I have to go into stand to win the game, that's what I'm going to do. And so I think that those are my counterpoints and why I personally think that those are good enough to keep her in being meta defining.
Interesting. All right. I see your points there, but I will agree to disagree.
Totally fine.
Somebody who has played out many Astema games and found the routes to stop the Astema player from doing the end game plan that they choose to do.
Sure.
There's a lot of counterplay that you can do to Astema that I think is just enough to edge her out there.
That's
fair. Just from my experience playing
totally
against
good.
the decks. Obviously, I haven't played Force Will in like a month, so I've only gotten a
couple games in. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Let me offer this, because there isn't a category here. Is Astema meta defining in the way that she is an anti-meta ruler pick right now?
I would say that the things that she brings to the table as an anchor, specifically, because remember, I'm considering her in this position as an anchor ruler. My strategy of my deck is not resolved around a stemma. A stemma is supporting the strategy that I'm doing for my deck. I would say that she sits in the meta category because the things that she brings to the table are very good against this meta. So yes, an anti-meta kind of idea.
I'm going to counterpoint here as well.
Let's
go. We've got counterpoint after counterpoint, baby. So, Jeremy, you're talking about how Astema you think is the best support ruler for any other, taking Carlina's spot as the best support ruler for other Fallen Angel rulers, correct?
I would say that she is very good as the anchor ruler, yes.
Then why is she not in the same category as Mujdart, who serves the same purpose in 6 Ages?
Because Astema also presents a better threat by herself than Mujdart does.
Bad, but okay, I see what you mean.
Mujdart needs other cards to be good. Like, Mujdart needs other cards to be good. Astema is a 2-cost flip, 14/14, practically unkillable, kills 2 things, draws 2 cards. Just by herself.
Jeremy, Astema cannot win the game without cards.
Sure, but she also exists with pay 2 black, essentially pays with an uninteractable pay 2 black win the game button.
So uninteractable, we say.
You can't remove the
I will also say this.
to do that.
Because in my experience with Order Killer,
sure,
although it was very limited, I've figured out like what to do with the deck now that I played it even just a little bit. What I will say is she's anti-meta to the Order rulers. She's potentially subpar meta to the Fallen Angel rulers.
Sure, for sure.
So that's why I'm saying she's anti-meta, because she's not like...
She accepts
anti-meta everything.
Inviable rather than the meta.
Paul?
I would say...
You get to decide.
I would say ballsy to put her in the meta. I would say conservative to put her in the viable.
So would we say low meta, high viable?
Top of viable, I think, is what I would consider.
Okay, I'm going to keep her in the meta because I
like
it. I just don't want the meta.
You put Carlina below her, I'm going to kill you, Jeremy.
I'm not going to put... Of course I'm not going to put Carlina below her. Are you kidding me? Like... There's no way. And the reason why Carlina gets to sit in the meta is because turn 1 Garion against Order decks is practically GG.
Game over, buddy.
Right? Like, Carlina, the biggest thing that Carlina brings to the table, and I think one of the reasons why I've been enjoying Order Killer so much, let's go to Carlina and why she clearly deserves to sit at the meta table.
Put her above Violet.
Put her above Violet? Cool, I'll put her above Violet.
Yeah.
And right there. And my reason is In my position is the thing that gives her. I honestly think the thing that gives, and this is, I mean, I'm biased because I've been playing Order Killer. The thing that gives her the most competitive viability here is that she actually has very, very good tools in the early game in this current environment to use her will and bypass her once per turn limit. The cards that she has available to her, I think, are very, very good. Are very, very good to get around her weakness of once per turn while also having good use of good answers just in general and good threats too, because Garion's insane. Yeah. Hello, cat. The boy. It's the boy.
The cats and everything goes tears.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think Carlina exists in there because the threats that she brings to the table and the fact that she gives you access to those threats and good answers so early because of her will production keeps her in the viability range. The meta viable range, absolutely. I don't think there's really anything else to say about Carlina. Mike, do you have any thoughts about Carlina?
Carlina's Bay. She's the best ruler ever. Nobody else can top her. I built decks that are stupid. I bought 20 Magic Stone Research Institutes because she can put it out on turn 1 and start with 2 stones.
She actually can do that. She actually can do that in this meta too because there's not as much green. There's not as much.
Even better in this meta.
Yeah, it is. It's better in this meta. It's very good. And then let's talk about Belial. So I have a hard time. I find myself between the meta and viable for Belial, purely because, and it really does come down to, prideful rule. Like, as silly as it sounds, the reason why I think Belial has a place and could be argued to go into the meta or viability based on what's being done right now is Belial's rule or prideful rule.
I'm gonna counteract this argument real
Sure,
quick.
go for it.
I think he's top of viable. I very much think he's like above Moosdart in terms of viability.
Sure.
But I think he's so meta dependent on whether or not you're facing aggressive decks or if you're facing decks that are passive enough to die to his tokens. And I don't think that those two decks are strong enough to do what he does. To make him do what he does as strongly as he used to.
Sure. I also think that I still think that the decks that are sitting when you include order rulers, right? Because we're just looking at Saga. When you include order rulers, I think that the things that you would potentially see at a GP and can see at like higher tables in a GP there are things in there that Belial can't comfortably like know that he's going to be able to beat, right? Like he can't beat all of them because I think Belial does have a place where he can't necessarily beat everything. And I think that what we see out of the order rulers is very much a situation where he can just get the matchup that plays in the way that he feels bad. Prideful Rule is a great card. Prideful Rule is a terrible card if your opponent doesn't cast anything, like put stuff on board, right? And there are very much order decks, and there are very much just like situational decks and non-situation and like other non-order decks that can say, no, we'll play the Callstone pass game, Belial. That's fine. Like, I know your best answer is Prideful Rule. I'm not gonna let you cast it, and then you're gonna feel real bad. So I would agree that on the high end of viable,
but nowhere near as good as he was last format, I would say.
Correct. I would agree. Still, I mean, like, I would still love to see if I'm a Belial player and I sit down across from a Violet, I'm still like, okay, good. Like I've still got, your
matchups are very good, but I think your matchups are not. I think Violet isn't high enough in the meta tier to make me want to think that Belial is good enough to be a main deck ruler. Side deck ruler? Hell yeah, let's go.
Yeah, I'm side decking
Belial against Violet every day.
I'm side decking it in Order Killer. Or I've thought about side decking it in Order Killer.
Yeah, I've done the
So-
same in my Wanderer decks too. Honestly, if I'm playing Carlina deck in Wanderer, which I can't anymore, banned.
We did it!
We
Woo!
did it! We broke the broken ruler! Yay! Now I have to do is break tree again.
Yeah. That's hard. That's
I'll worry
going.
about
That's turning out to be harder than I thought.
Jeremy, leave it to me.
Okay. I'll give it to you, my friend. After getting 3-0'd by Nyarlathotep, that's harder than I thought. But yeah, so this is it. This is the list. I feel pretty comfortable here. I feel pretty.
Toss bread to locals just to make the bread simps.
Oh, sure, fine. The Brad can go into the locals. I think that post rotation, looking at like where rulers fall, honestly, this to me is fine. Like it feels like if I was to go back in time and look at like where are they nows in this exact same environment for like every cluster kind of thing, I would expect to see kind of some kind of spread like this. We have the rulers who are just from beginning to end of cluster who are just not viable. We have the rulers who are like from beginning to end of cluster who are like maybe there's something there worth looking at, not necessarily a first choice. We have some rulers from beginning to end of cluster who have gotten some new life from new support cards and are suddenly something that you could potentially choose. And then we have the obvious strong choices. Overall, I feel confident in this, and like I'm pretty pleased with how the spread is. Yeah, and I think that this list is completely different in Wanderer.
Oh yeah, 100%. Because Feethsing and Carlina aren't on here. We just kind of have to take them off.
Yeah, we just have to remove them.
And then Brad can get even lower than he is.
Yeah, for sure.
So
for sure.
it's fine.
So like I said, the link, I'll post the link again in the chat. I'm going to screenshot this and post it in the Forcible Global page, explaining what this is, and a link to the tier maker will be in there as well. And I'd be curious to hear how you differ from us or what your expectations are.
Tell us why we're wrong about Tier 0 Mikage.
The other reason why I'm also saving this from putting it on global is it'll be very interesting to, like you say, Robert Green, visit again when we have more tournaments under our belt, see if our predictions or our thoughts were correct, and see kind of if there's any big changes from these rulers. I think this format is still far from solved. I think it definitely has some clear and present boogeymen. I do think that there is a lot of meta calling involved in this meta still. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. So looking forward to our first tournament. There is an event posted for Level Up Expo in Las Vegas the last weekend of February. I will say that when this event was hosted 2 years ago, it was hosted by Carta Magica, who's hosting it again, and it was a GP 2 years ago.
Jeremy, just tell us it's a GP.
I don't know that it's a GP. It hasn't been confirmed to be a GP yet. There's precedent for the history of it being a GP.
Jim, if you're watching this, let us know.
So we don't know. What I'm saying is forcible event at Las Vegas, some kind of forcible event at Las Vegas for Level Up Expo at the end of February. So start looking so that you're aware, so that if it's is a GP, you're ready to go. And if it's not a GP, you're already thinking about whether it might be worth it to come anyway. So that is it for tonight. Thank you all so much for watching. And until next time, this has been myself, DMO73, and I have been joined, as always, by my Grants.
The placement of Mikage is wrong. Don't listen to...
And Paul Reisman.
Currently building a red Welser deck.
And until next time, class dismissed.